Hello everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Charles Kovess Show. This is episode 14. This show is guided by the formula SA plus P equals S. Self-awareness plus passion equals success. Your self-awareness together with your passion, harnessing and pursuing your passion, gives you success. This also ties into happiness. Do you think you would be successful if you weren't happy? Or if you were happy, you would probably feel successful. And I think the experience that I've had in life and the people that I've worked with over the years, people want to be happy. And this show is all about giving you ideas that will lead to your success and your happiness, or your self-awareness will make you so happy that you will feel successful. Either way, your life will be improved. Since 1993, I have been Australasia's passion provocateur, provoking, inspiring, teaching people to identify their passion, to pursue their passion. It's a great way to live life. This show is also guided by Socrates' famous quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I hope this show inspires you, provokes you to continually examine your life so that you are living a life that has meaning for you, where you have this access to unlimited energy, which is what passion gives you, so that every morning when you wake up, you're ready to embrace the challenges that inevitably come on the way to living a magnificent life. And I do believe that each one of us is designed, we're on the planet here, to live a magnificent life. I'm wearing my red jacket, red for the colour of passion, so I hope that sticks in your mind. Every time you see red, you go, passion. Am I pursuing my passion? Am I seeking my passion if I don't know what it is? Each week I'll be giving you a joke. That reminds me, I do have a joke for you. Because today we're filming this show, presenting from another environment. I wonder whether you picked that up from the start. Last night, we had a meal that reminded me of this story of a guy who goes into a restaurant. He's looking at the menu and the waitress comes up to him and he says, "I think I'd like a quickie." And she's absolutely offended and slaps him across the head and says, you're rude," and walks away. And the guy shakes his head and the next waitress comes up and he says, "I'd like a quickie, please." And she slaps him and walks away. The guy at the next table leans over, having seen what's happened, and says, "Sir, I think they pronounce that quiche." Last night we had quiche for dinner. And this show's being brought to you from the bowels of Mornington Peninsula in Balnarring. It's a whole new environment, and we're here with Julie's family, and we're having a wonderful time, and we had a wonderful quiche last night. I'll give you an idea for a book, a song, a quote, a spiritual tip. This show is very much driven by spirituality and the human spirit, and whatever else comes into my mind. And one big idea that can change your life. This show is definitely not aiming to be politically correct. And one idea that occurs to me at the moment is around a global problem of Black Lives Matter. I am horrified that if I say every life matters, that I'm racist. I say bullshit. Every life matters. And if you look at the blackest person you can find, and by the way, what a joke that is, because I'm hardly white. And if you want to look at white, look, that's white. That piece of paper is white. My skin's not white. And black is black. There's a whole range of it. Bruce Pascoe, an Australian author who claims to be black, Aboriginal, is as white as I'm white. This idea that saying every life matters is racist is such a ridiculous idea, and I will talk about this in subsequent episodes, but this ties into this question of responsibility. It is so seductive for people who identify as black to play the victim game. Here's my promise to you. You play victim, your life is miserable. The opposite of playing victim is to take responsibility. You are responsible for your life. Don't blame what happened 200 years ago, 3 centuries ago. That is such a cop-out, and there are certain people, certain powers to be on this planet that want you to play the victim. Do you know why they want you to play the victim? Because that makes you weak, disabled, disempowered, so that you become controllable. I reject the idea of being controllable. You control your life, not government, not other people. You have to make these decisions, and playing victim and not taking responsibility totally takes away your personal power. This show is about building up your personal power so that you have the power to build the life that you want to create. It's now time for one of my addictions. You know I love coffee. So, a quick review of the week. I have to say, I am appalled by Daniel Andrews, the Victorian Premier, and the way that he's handling this coronavirus and re-establishing restrictions. I say again, there are experts right around the world who reject the idea that this coronavirus deserves a lockdown. Steve Waterson, in yesterday's Australian newspaper, wrote a beautiful story about his father, who was put in hospital at the age of 87 in England. He was not allowed a visitor. He was not allowed his daughter to visit him. Steve Waterson now lives in Australia, and he dies without seeing his son and his daughter. Appalling. All in the name of this nonsense around this coronavirus. I reject the nonsense. I study other experts. I urge you to study those experts, because if you remain controllable by governments who are not speaking truth, who are not allowing you to listen to other ideas, who are wanting you to be fearful, who are driving this idea that the only solution is a vaccine, you are being sadly misinformed. Inform yourself. I'm spending a lot of time informing myself. I wish I didn't have to spend this much time informing myself, but I am. Julie and I have been continuing our exercise this morning from Balnarring. I rode up to Arthur's Seat. It was a very hard climb up to there, but it was a good workout. And just to let you know, the idea of climbing up steep mountains is not attractive, but gosh, it feels good now that I've done it. The other big thing that's happened during the week is conversations by economists in the media as to whether stock markets are going to go up or down. Are we going to have, with all of this printing of money right around the world and in Australia, this vast surplus that we're going to have, is this going to lead to deflation or inflation? Because if it's going to lead to inflation, you wouldn't repay your debts. You'd borrow more money. If it's going to lead to deflation, you would pay back your debts. They are excellent, interesting questions. And once again, we're living in this age of uncertainty. And so where self-awareness and passion becomes relevant is that you can thrive in uncertain times. You wake up and you go, that's an interesting question. I wonder what's going to happen. And I'm reminded again of my parents having to go through the Second World War, and many of your parents went through the Second World War. And each morning they wake up, hey, I wonder whether I'm going to survive today. That ability to thrive in life as the uncertain world that we live in at all times, but even more so now, That is a great ability to have. And so that you feel during the day, you're not feeling like I'm worried, I'm scared, I'm fearful. No, you are embracing this adventure of life. The other big thing that I want to bring to your attention that I have been spending time on during the week is Tony Robbins. Many years ago, in fact, I did my first Tony Robbins program about 28 years ago, and I've done a number of his live programs. He is a true master. And on Facebook this week, he is running a thing called the Tony Robbins Comeback Challenge. It goes for 7 days. The replays are available. If you want a whole new way of thinking or to be reminded about great principles for living your life, I urge you to spend time looking at that comeback challenge. The ideas I have found wonderfully reinforcing and forcing me to remember stuff I used to do that I haven't been doing. I thought, oh gosh, that's a good reminder. And one of them is, what state am I in? And the state that I'm in is very much driven by my physiology. And so if I'm feeling tired, if I change my physiology, it changes my state. Now I teach that, but I haven't been practicing it enough myself, believe it or not. So it's a great reminder and a constant useful reminder of the value of ongoing learning. So it's been, again, a blessing. While this coronavirus lockdown is on, Tony Robbins came up with this idea to do this 7-day comeback challenge to help people cope with this. I've got great value from it. I think you might get value from it too. Now for today's big idea. And before I do, I invite you to subscribe to this YouTube channel, download the podcast or subscribe to the podcast for the Charles Covess Show, and also to subscribe to Passion Points to Ponder. These are regular written ideas to make you think, to help you think differently, more deeply about certain topics. I've had great feedback over the last 20 years from these passion points. I think you'll find them useful. Now, today's big idea. The essential scary steps for your skill development. The essential scary step that you have to be willing to take if you want to develop skills is you have to be willing to make mistakes. Are you willing to make mistakes? I put to you, based on the principles of Buckminster Fuller, a man who was awarded 47 honorary doctorates. He died in 1983. He said, human beings have only learnt through trial and error. There is not one skill that you and I have that we developed without making mistakes. I'm a father of 5 children. When each one of them started to eat, they would make mistakes because the spoon wouldn't even reach their mouth. When they started to walk, they didn't start walking, bang, away they're walking. No, they fell over. And they fell over a second time and a third time. I didn't say to them, you're not a walker, here's a wheelchair. No, I said, get up, try again. Fall over, get up, try again. Any skill that I have developed has required me to fail and try again. In gymnastics, it is said that you have to repeat a move 10,000 times before you can master it. You have heard of the 10,000 hour rule. The Beatles became great musicians because they spent 10,000 hours playing at Hamburg and all of the preceding years before they became famous in 1963 and 1964. So one of the elements of success is to understand that you can never master any skill without going through the mistakes process. And here's the problem. We have been trained to avoid making mistakes. We are rewarded for getting the right answer. And I look back on my life, and I was rewarded as a child if I did the right thing and didn't make a mistake. I was a good boy if I didn't make a mistake. Now, it's quite an interesting question to contemplate. Is it a mistake or is it simply a lack of skill? That is, in each case, a question of discussion. For example, I'm now happily married to my third and final wife, Julie. But I say to people, I've had 3 successful marriages. But was my first marriage a mistake? Was my second marriage a mistake? I don't think so. But some people would say that it was. And my mother certainly says, oh, you've made mistakes in your marriages. That's true. Have you made mistakes in relationships? I've certainly made mistakes in relationships. I've certainly made mistakes in marriages. I've certainly made mistakes in business, in my legal career. And one of the core elements of understanding mistakes is that it leads you to help develop your philosophy on mistakes. In my experience and the people that I've coached, they do not have a philosophy on mistakes other than avoid them or don't get caught. It's like the 11th commandment, thou shalt not get caught. We live in changing times. Everything's changing. How on earth do you hope to thrive when you have a fear, a deadly fear, a disenabling fear of making mistakes? I urge you to review your life and think about the mistakes you've made and become consciously aware of what's going on in your subconscious mind about this issue. And I urge you to, from now on, from this show on, saying, I acknowledge that the only way I can get better at anything is through making mistakes. That will liberate you. And it's the liberation from fear that enables us to access love, because when you're fearful of making mistakes, your capabilities are so shrunken. Now, do I love making mistakes? No. Do I hate making mistakes? Yes. Do I know I have to make them? Yes. So, that's the scary element of skill development. And part of the problem is, as we get older, we say we don't want to face the pain of making mistakes. We've had enough pain. Well, this show is to remind you that no, firstly, that the learning and growing process goes on, because if you're not learning and growing, you're dying. So that's the first thing. The second thing, for the rest of your life, this is a relentless journey. Relentless, joyful, successful journey, because you know what the purpose of your life is, and you're pursuing your passion or discovering your passion, and you know that the good life is not the easy, relaxed, layback life. Like I said earlier in the show, playing the victim game. Yes, bring me everything. What a losing, boring life that is. That's not what we're on this planet for. So, a philosophy on mistakes that is usable for you in your life is what I taught my daughter Rebecca when she was in year 8 at Sacré-Cœur, and she told her teachers at Sacré-Cœur in Glen Iris, my dad says mistakes are good. Mistakes are good. And your company must develop a mistakes philosophy. I can help your company do that. I've worked with companies. Companies must have a mistakes philosophy, because if a company punishes employees for making honest mistakes, those companies will struggle. The great companies are those who understand the value of mistakes. And I want to share with you a great story. Tom Watson is the founder of IBM, and he had a senior executive who'd lost a lot of money in a particular division. In fact, some millions of dollars. And Tom Watson sent a message to this executive to say, come and see me on Monday. And over the weekend, he and his wife were making plans of what's going to happen after he gets sacked on Monday, because he knew he'd be sacked. On Monday, Tom Watson calls him in and says, Jack, I'm making you the head of a whole new division that I'm setting up. And Jack's shocked and he says, what? Tom Watson says, what's up with you? He says, I thought you were going to sack me. Why would I sack you? He said, well, I lost all that money. Sack you? I've just invested all that money in your education. What a great perspective. Companies that lose money through mistakes made by executives should look on that as an investment in education. If it's a dishonest mistake, or if it's dishonesty, that's not a mistake. I'm talking about honest mistakes made in the pursuit of legitimate business goals. If your company where you work does not have a clear philosophy, a clear set of principles on what happens if you make honest mistakes, push for it or bring me in to help you develop it. So, that's the idea for the week. Now, the song of the week. Frank Sinatra. Have a listen to these words. Nothing's impossible, I have found, for when my chin is on the ground, I pick myself up, dust myself off, start all over again. Don't lose your confidence if you slip. I won't burden your ears anymore. It goes on. Be grateful for a pleasant trip and pick yourself up. Dust yourself off. Start all over again. Work like a soul inspired till the battle of the day is won. You may be sick and tired, but you'll be a man, my son. Ties into my ride up Arthur's seat. You might be tired, but you'll be a man, because you can't be a man if you are always looking for the easy way. Will you remember the famous men who had to fall to rise again? So take a deep breath, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, start all over again. I hope that song helps you remind yourself of the need to make these mistakes. The book of the week is by Daniel Goleman on emotional intelligence. Part of this journey of shifting our emotions around mistakes is to understand what emotional intelligence is. Developing your emotional intelligence helps your leadership skills, helps you manage people, helps you understand yourself more so that you can understand others. Daniel Goleman, Emotional Intelligence. My health tip of the week is do something hard. And if you want this reminder, watch that show called Hard Quiz. Live life in hard ways sometimes. By putting yourself under pressure, you force development. It reminds you of the wonderful capability of your body. Put it under pressure. My spiritual tip ties also into forgiveness. Forgive yourself. Forgive yourself, because you will not be able to forgive others to any greater degree than you forgive yourself. And last week on the spiritual tip, I talked about forgiveness. Are you capable of forgiving yourself for the mistakes you have made in the past? I think a lot of people are burdened down by these mistakes, and your soul suffers because of your failure to forgive yourself. Forgiveness is one of the 10 F's of spirituality. You must have made mistakes. It's now time to let them go. Forgive yourself on this wonderful journey. Because the other issue around the mistakes that you made is that those mistakes were crucial elements of making you who you are today. Without those mistakes, you would not be who you are today. Now, it's time for the quote of the day. And this is by Theodore Roosevelt, President of the United States in the early 20th century. I love this quote. I have it on my wall. It's a long quote. Feel what I'm sharing with you. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs and comes short again and again, who knows the great enthusiasms, the great devotions, and spends himself in a worthy cause, who, at the best, knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. Have a go. Now, I had a go. I had to go with marriage, and I thought, a spot of, great quotes on marriage. These made me laugh, Rodney Dangerfield, he said this: my wife and I were happy for 20 years. Then we met. Robin Williams, who talk about, knocking yourself off because you're not feeling successful. He said, yes, divorce, from the Latin word meaning to rip out a man's genitals through his wallet. Dwayne Dewell, I've never heard of him, he said, a married man should forget his mistakes. No use two people remembering the same thing. So, I wonder whether my ex-wives remember my mistakes. I'm sure they do. And Helen Rowland, I love this one. When you see a married couple walking down the street, the one that's a few steps ahead is the one that's mad. So there you are. There's some thoughts on marriage. I thought very relevant to the mistakes that I've made in my life with marriage. And I have forgiven myself. Trust me, I've forgiven myself. It's led to my most wonderful third and final wife, the perfect wife. So, and the lessons that I've learned have been wonderful. So, I think that's all I want to cover. Thank you for being with us in this show this week. Practice this one idea. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Subscribe to the podcast channel. Subscribe to Passion Points to Ponder. Have a look at my books. Passionate People Produce Passionate Performance. If you want to share some of these ideas in your company, in your organization, or personally, come to charlescovest.com. That's the website dealing with the self-awareness and passion quest. And covest.com is the website dealing with corporate programs and public programs. So charlescovest.com, covest.com. Until next week, may you live a life of challenge, of learning, of development, of doing your own thinking, of fun, of high energy, and a constant embrace of this wonderful gift that we've been given, which is life itself. Thanks for being with us. See you next week.